Ayato is a reasonless, ugly-faced loser, but unlike you, he's secretly a master swordsman who can clap any girl he wants. When his sister mysteriously goes missing, he enrolls in her old school and pretends to be ordinary to find out what happened to her. Unfortunately, on his first day, he was mistaken for a shameless peeping Tom by a girl named Julius when he jumped through her window to return her handkerchief. Fortunately, she listened to his explanation and thanked him for returning her property with a friendly smile. However, she turned out to be a reincarnation of Harley Quinn, and it took the dim-witted idiot a few seconds to realize that he was about to become burnt toast, so he jumped out of her window right before she went all Azula on his Julius immediately went after him and challenged him to a duel for seeing her almost naked body. She told him that if he won, she would accept his flimsy excuse that he was a clueless noob who had no idea he had walked into the girl's dorm. However, if she won the match, she got to decide his fate. Ayato knew better than to duel with an angry woman, so he tried to refuse her challenge by saying he had no weapon. Unfortunately, there was a busybody amongst the students who had gathered to watch them, and he threw a sword at Ayato to use, so he accepted her challenge. Julius then shot fire spears at him, but Ayato, feeling very much like Jon Snow, began cutting and dodging the flames. Annoyed, Julius increased the speed of her spears and sent them towards him again, forcing Ayato to try and block the attack. However, the force pushed him back, so he made sure to cut through the flames before dodging the final spear. This made students around to voice their admiration for his skills, but it only annoyed Julius that he was still unharmed. In a final attempt to win the duel, she shot a huge fireball at him, but instead of running away as she hoped, Ayato charged at it. As soon as she figured out what his plan was, she caused the fireball to explode, but she didn't know he had trained under Rengoku until he slashed through the flames. Jules was surprised and tried to defend herself against his attack, but to her surprise, he pushed her to the ground. When she tried scolding him for doing so, she noticed he wasn't looking at her, so she turned to see what had caught his attention. It was then she realized that he had saved her from an assassination attempt. However, she decided to act like an ungrateful brat and started complaining. Ayato was just about to tell her to be grateful when he realized one of his hands was coping a feel of her plots. Julius screamed in embarrassment and was about to send him into the afterlife when Claudia, the student council president, intervened. Julius asked why she was sticking her nose in their business, but she ignored her questions and declared the duel invalid, saying that Ayato had yet to complete his transfer process to become a full member of the academy. Claudia then took Ayato to her office, where she welcomed him to the academy, after which she explained that the students' main duty was to compete in an event called Festus against other schools. She revealed that their academy hadn't done well in recent years, and said that all they required of him was to win the games. Claudia let him know that anything he desired would be granted by the academy if he won, but Ayato told her he wasn't interested. However, he asked if she knew anything about his older sister Haruka, who was once a student at the school. Claudia pulled up an old student data record and showed it to him. She explained that Haruka had enrolled in the academy 5 years ago, but had withdrawn after 6 months due to personal reasons. The only thing strange about it was that almost all records of her had been erased, making it hard for them to be sure if she had actually been a student there. She then told him about a weapon called Orgalux Servaresta, which had no checkout records but had combat data from 5 years ago. Claudia apologized for not having more information on his sister, but he told her not to worry as his search for his sister wasn't the only reason he had come to the academy. His words made her curious, so she asked what other reason he had for coming, and he told her it was to find his purpose. Although she was skeptical, Claudia accepted his explanation before telling him that all students were entitled to an Orgalux weapon. Ayato asked if he could have the Servaresta, so she told him that she'd arranged for him to collect and handed him a random Lux weapon to use until then. When Ayato asked what he had to do to complete his transfer, she told him she had lied to get him out of the sticky situation with Julius. Later on, he was introduced to his new class and made to sit beside Julius, who wasn't pleased with the idea. After class, Ayato asked Julius if they could be friends, and she told him that she'd rather shave her eyebrows off and become friends with him. After she walked away, the boy sitting behind Ayato told him not to feel bad about the way the Ice Queen spoke to him. He said Julius preferred her own company and introduced himself as Yabuki Aishiru. On their way to the dorms, Yabuki let Ayato know that Julius was the crown princess of her country, which made Ayato ask why she was at the academy. Yabuki said only Julius could answer that, and added that she won every duel she ever fought, quickly increasing her rank in the school to 5th. When they got outside, they spotted Julius arguing with a guy who looked like he spent more time at the gym than at school. Ayato asked who he was, and Yabuki told him that his name was Lester, adding that he was ranked 9th in the academy. As they watched on, it seemed that Lester was trying to get Julius to duel against him, but she refused. When she tried to walk away, Lester grabbed her hand, making her handkerchief fall, so she got angry. The following day, Ayato went for a run, and as he ran, he recalled what had happened the previous day with Julius and Lester. Before things could get ugly, he had inserted himself into their conversation, and one of Lester's friends pointed out that he'd been the one to duel Julius. Hearing those words made Lester try to fight him instead, but when Yabuki started recording, his friends advised him against it. Lester had listened to them, but told Julius that he would make her acknowledge him before walking away. Julius then told Ayato to be careful, but instead of taking her advice, he asked why she was at the academy. He pointed out that she was a princess and wasn't required to be there fighting duels, but she told him she was doing it for the money. She said she needed a large sum of money, and the only way to get it was to participate in the Phoenix Festa. Yabuki then asked if she had a partner since the Festa was a tag team event, and she told them that she hadn't found one yet. When he asked what kind of partner she was looking for, she listed out a bunch of qualities she needed in her partner, all of which the boys thought was a little bit too much. The next moment, Yabuki got a call, so he bid them farewell and left to attend a meeting. Ayato then asked Julius to give him directions to the male dorms, and after she did, he asked if she would give him a tour of the city. Julius tried to refuse, but he reminded her that he had saved her life, so she owed it to him. Julius finally agreed and said they would meet up on the day they were both free from classes. Back in the present, Ayato completed his run, and later he went to class with Yabuki. When he noticed Julius, he greeted her, and to the surprise of everyone present, she returned his greeting. Julius had to remind them that she wasn't some animal in the zoo. When they kept staring at her, Ayato noticed a blue-haired girl sleeping next to him, and when she raised her head, he called her Saya. Saya happened to be his childhood friend, whom he hadn't seen for a while. However, it seemed that time had changed much about her, as she was still the same shortstop lolly he'd always known. Ayato then asked about her father, so she told him that the man had made her enroll at the academy, because he wanted her to give some exposure to his new guns. Their teachers soon walked into the classroom, and when she saw Saya, she asked why she skipped class the previous day. Saya told her it was because she had overslept, which made the teacher laugh before giving her a knock on the head. As Ayato teased Saya for still being a lazy-ass bum, Julius looked at them the way a jealous girlfriend would. This was why immediately after class, she went to touch up her makeup and then returned to invite Ayato for the tour. Saya, who he'd been speaking to before Julius interrupted them, asked why she was giving him a tour since it wasn't a secret that Julius hated people. Julius told her to stop being nosy, but that only made Saya insist on giving the tour herself. Julius didn't like Saya's suggestion, so she argued that she'd been at the academy longer than Saya, so it was better if she handled the tour. While both girls bickered like an old married couple, Claudia walked in and pressed her blossom to Ayato's side. She then told the girls that if anyone had the right to give Ayato a tour, it would be her since she'd been attending the academy longer than both of them. This forced both girls to come to an agreement and refuse her offer. Claudia pretended to be sad before she handed over the documents she needed him to sign to collect the serveresta. She also informed him that the selection and compatibility test would be held the next day. After signing the papers, Ayato handed them back to her, and as she walked away, she reminded Saya and Julius that she would have Ayato all to herself the next day. With Claudia gone, Ayato convinced both girls to give the tour to avoid another argument, so headed out together. However, for some reason it seemed like Saya was the new student with the way she acted when Julius mentioned something. This made Julius point out that the tour wasn't for her. But Saya told her it wasn't her fault, she was as directionally challenged as her cousin Zoro. Julius then asked why she had insisted on giving Ayato the tour when she didn't know her way around. Not wanting to be involved in their argument, Ayato excused himself to buy some drinks, leaving the girls alone. As soon as Saya was sure he couldn't hear them, she asked Julius once again why she was giving Ayato a tour. Julius admitted she was doing it as a favor because Ayato had saved her life during their duel. Saya was surprised to hear about the duel and asked what the results were, so Julius told her it was declared void by Claudia. Saya then said that under normal circumstances, Julius wouldn't have walked away from the duel unharmed. She told her that although she was strong, she wasn't on the same level as Ayato when it came to fighting. When she mentioned that in terms of strength, both of them were equals, Julius refused to accept it. She even challenged Saya to a duel, but before they could begin, they were shot at with some arrows. Julius recognized them as the same one that had been used to target her during her duel with Ayato, and when she noticed the culprit, she shot her fire spear at him. Before it could reach him, another hooded figure deflected it, forcing Saya to shoot at them with a big Lux grenade launcher. Julius just watched in as she fired another shot which destroyed the water fountain and drenched their clothes. When Ayato returned, he found both girls drenched, and while Julius tried to cover herself up. This made Julius ask where her undergarments were, and she admitted she hadn't reached the stage of puberty where she needed plot armor. The next day, Ayato went to the weapons testing area with Claudia, and there he met Lester, whom Claudia informed him was also there to choose a weapon. When it was time for the test to begin, Lester went first, and he selected Cervaresta, making Ayato worried. However, Claudia explained that if the compatibility between Lester and the weapon wasn't up to 80%, Lester couldn't take it. They then watched as Lester tried his best to get the weapon to recognize him, but kept getting low points. As they watched him struggle, Claudia pointed out that force wasn't going to be enough to wield the weapon. Ayato asked how she knew that, and she told him it was because she had an Obra Lux weapon of her own. Just then, Lester tried to force the weapon to obey him, but it threw him against the wall as the compatibility rate dropped into the negative zone. Lester was then advised to stop trying as things could get dangerous, but to Claudia's surprise, Cervaresta attacked Ayato. Ayato had to fight it and somehow managed to get it under control, causing his compatibility with it to almost reach 100%. Later that night, Ayato went to see Claudia in her room because she had something to discuss with them. After offering him a chair, she showed him the files of all the students who had signed up for the Phoenix Festa. She said that over the past few weeks, each of them had been forced to withdraw from the competition because of one injury or the other. Ayato asked if they had also been attacked just like Julie's, and she told him they had no proof of an attack. However, Lester and one of his friends named Randy were the main suspects as they had no alibi for where they were when Julie's was attacked. Claudia then asked him to keep a close eye on Julie's so that in case she was attacked again, he could be there to help her out. Ayato asked why she didn't assign the job to someone else, so she explained that Julie's hated everyone else except for him. Days later, Ayato met up with Julie's for their tour of the city, and after the tour, they stopped to get some lunch. While they ate, Ayato talked to Julie's about the recent attacks on her and suggested that she not go anywhere alone. Julie's refused, saying she wasn't going to hide away like some scared wuss because of a spineless coward. Before Ayato could respond to her, Lester and his friends, Dumb and Dumber, interrupted them. Julie's told them to bug off, but Lester insisted that she fight him as he wanted to prove he was better than her. Ayato had to step in and point out that he was acting like a muscle-brained fool, proving that his IQ was lower than that of SpongeBob's. Lester didn't like being insulted by someone he considered a pathetic weakling, but his friends managed to convince him not to fight either Ayato or Julie's. Later on, while Julie's and Ayato were on their way home, they came across a group of students from the Wolf Academy arguing. As they watched in, the students began fighting one another, but it turned out to be a ploy as they eventually turned to attack Julie's and Ayato. Julie's decided to do some exercise and beat the shit out of all of them, leaving only the leader conscious so she could get answers from him. He confessed they had been hired to hurt them, and pointed towards the nearby trees at the hooded figure. Immediately, Julia went after the person, completely ignoring Ayato's warning. As she ran through the forest, she nearly had her head sliced off as the man had led her into yet another ambush. As Ayato ran towards her, he noticed someone trying to shoot her and tried to warn her. However, the attackers surprised both of them by shooting at Ayato instead of Julie's. Fortunately, Ayato deflected the shot with his Lux weapon. Almost immediately, the attackers ran off, leaving Julie's to scold Ayato for being reckless, even though she'd had been the one to put them in the mess in the first place. That night, Julie's invited Ayato to her room so she could mend his shirt, but when she asked him to take it off, the slow-brained idiot thought she wanted them to bump uglies. Julie's immediately set him straight and explained that she wanted to see his shirt, not become his first baby mama. As she sewed his shirt, he noticed a picture on her table and asked if they were her friends. Julie's told him that they were and went on to tell him the story of how she had met them after getting lost in the slums. She said the girls had saved her from some thugs and had taken her to the orphanage where they lived. Since then, whenever she snuck out of the palace, she went to spend time with them. As time went on, she discovered that the orphanage had no funding, so she decided to enroll in the academy, where she fought and sent her prize money to them. She also told him that her handkerchief was her most prized possession because the girls had given it to her. The next morning, Julie found a letter in her locker, so immediately after classes, she rushed out like the roof was on fire. Ayato and Nabuki stood together in the hallway discussing her strange behavior when Claudia joined them. She asked what the matter was and Nabuki told her about the letter Julius had been reading earlier. It was then they realized it was from her attacker, making Ayato ask why she refused to tell him about it. Claudia pointed out that Julius might have wanted to protect him by not involving him in her problems. Ayato then decided that he would be the one to protect her, so Claudia handed the serveretta to him before he ran off to help Julius. Meanwhile, Julius had just arrived at the location the letter had asked her to go and found Silas, one of Lester's minions there. Julius hadn't been surprised, as she had already figured out he was the one behind the attacks because of what he'd said to Lester the day before. Just as Julius pulled out her sword, Lester arrived and demanded to know if it was true that Silas was the real culprit. It turned out Silas had also sent him a letter, saying that Julius had accepted his challenge to duel. But the truth was Silas had sent those letters to trick both of them into coming as he planned to get rid of them and make Lester look like the real culprit. Anchored by this revelation, Lester attacked Silas, but his axe was blocked by one of the puppets Silas was controlling. Still, Lester tried his best to get to Silas and took out the puppets only for Silas to summon more, which eventually overpowered Lester. Julius fought them off too, using her fire abilities to aid herself, but she wasn't strong enough to take them all down. As the puppets pinned her to the wall, Silas began blabbing about how she was going to lose. Julius told him to shut his sewer-smelling mouth and said she knew he'd been hired by Academy. Silas was surprised she was able to figure it out and said because she knew too much, he had to silence her permanently. However, before he could go ahead with his plan, Ayato made a very dramatic entrance. He sliced the puppets closest to Julius in half as he swept her out of their hands and into his. Julius was surprised to see him and began scolding him for putting himself in danger by coming to her rescue. But he insisted that he wanted to protect her. He said she was fighting to protect her friends back home, but had no one to protect her, so he was going to do so for her. Just when Julius started acting all shy and innocent, Silas interrupted them, reminding them that they still had to fight him. Ayato assured him that they could take him on, so Silas summoned all his remaining puppets and attacked Ayato. To prove that he was no match for him, Ayato carried Julius in one hand while he fought with his other hand. After all his puppets had been wiped out, Silas summoned his last puppet, which happened to be a cheap imitation of Donkey Kong. Ayato didn't even feel intimidated as he got rid of the Gorilla Grodd wannabe immediately. Silas tried to escape using a flying puppet, but Julius and Ayato went after him and knocked him out of the sky. Fortunately, he was a Genestella, so the fall didn't do him any harm, but the moment he saw Claudia, he took off running. Meanwhile, Ayato and Julius were enjoying the view of the city from their position in the sky. When Ayato suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest, Julius became worried as he screamed and some purple chains binding him tightened around his body. The pain was too much for him to bear, so he passed out, and as he slept, he dreamed of the day Haruka bound those chains around him. When he eventually woke up, he was lying on Julius's lap, and she informed him that Claudia was on her way to get them. After she forced him to remain in his position, she asked him who cast the binding spell on him. Ayato told her that his sister had done it, and said he had no idea why she had put the spell on him. He then asked Julius if she had found a partner for the Phoenix Festa yet, and offered to partner with her if she didn't have one, so she agreed. Elsewhere, Silas was still running from Claudia, but in the end, she cornered him and injured him, after which she handed him over to Yabuki. Yabuki asked if she was trying to keep things quiet, because she wanted to use the information they had to keep Alicant indebted to them. Claudia didn't respond to his question, but said she would trust him to take care of Silas and find out everything he knew. Some days later, Claudia had a meeting with the student council presidents of the other academies, and they discussed the cooperation between Sedukan Academy and Alicant Academy to create a new Lux weapon. Meanwhile, Ayato was in a rush to meet Julius when he accidentally bumped into a girl named Kieran. Just as they both apologized to each other, they were interrupted by a man who yelled at her for making him wait, so Kieran rushed over to him. Later on, during their training session, Julius attacked Ayato aggressively and almost defeated him. But Ayato managed to withstand her fierce attacks, allowing him to avoid defeat. After the training session, they discussed their strategy for the upcoming festival. Julius warned Ayato not to engage in unnecessary duels that might reveal his fighting style, as they need to keep his abilities a secret. As they continued their conversation, Saya and Lester walked into the room, and Saya expressed her disapproval of Julius monopolizing Ayato's time and claimed that they engaged in some adult-rated exercises. Eventually, they both got into a heated argument, but Ayato and Lester ignored them. Lester then thanked Ayato for helping him out even though he didn't outright say it as he felt ashamed. The next moment, Claudia arrived with Ernesta and Camilla, students from Alicant Academy, and introduced them as the engineers who were collaborating with Saidukan on the new Lux weapon. However, Ernesta began acting like a complete wacko around Ayato and whispered something into his ear before kissing him on the cheek. This made both Julius and Saya jealous, as they pulled out their weapons to attack. Camilla tried to apologize for Ernesta's behavior, but then noticed Saya's weapon, so she complimented it only to surprise Saya by talking trash about it because of the flaws it has. Saya demanded she take back her words since she viewed them as an insult to her father. Camilla refused and insulted the weapon more just because it was made by Saya's dad, which she claimed caused trouble for them. Ernesta then told Saya that if she wanted to force an apology from Camilla, she should do it during the Phoenix Festa. This made Saya ask Ayato to be her partner, but Julius refused as he was already her partner. Later on, Ayato was discussing Alicant's research teams with Yabuki when they heard a slap sound and went over to investigate. Ayato intervened when the scumbag of a man tried to hit Kirin again, saying he wasn't a real man if he hit girls. The man, whose name was Koichiro, revealed that Kirin was his niece, so he had every right to discipline her. When Ayato asked him not to do it again, Koichiro offered Ayato a deal and said that if Ayato could defeat Kirin, he would never hit her again. Ayato accepted the challenge and they began the duel, and as they fought, Kirin was surprised by Ayato's strength, so she commended him for it. Julius soon then arrived at the scene and discovered that Ayato had gone against her warning. When the duel ended, Kirin was named the winner, and Julius scolded Ayato for being stupid enough to duel against the top-ranked student of their academy. Meanwhile, Koichiro spoke to Kirin in a very condescending manner and told her that without his help, she could never achieve the status of rank 1. He told her to obey his orders if she ever wanted her dreams to come true. Later on, Julius walked in the common area and threw a towel on Ayato's face. She was mad at him because he ignored her warnings and dueled Kirin, but she admitted that she would also stand up for Kirin if she had been the one to see her uncle hurt her. She also expressed her disappointment towards Ayato for not being able to defeat Kirin. She told him that there were 3 people at Saidukan she couldn't beat at her current level, and they were none other than Ayato, Claudia, and Kirin. Later that day, Ayato went to see Claudia to collect a new badge, and they talked about Koichiro, who was desperate to join the Academy's executive panel. She said the man was so ruthless that he was willing to sacrifice his niece to get what he wanted. She also revealed that her mother was part of the executive board, which surprised Ayato. On his way back to the dorm, he came across Kirin, who had come to thank him for his help earlier. As he walked her back to her dorm, asked her why she fought so hard, and she told him it was because she wanted to help her father, who was in prison. Ayato then invited her to train with him and Julius, but she declined his offer, saying she had been forbidden by her uncle to train with others. This made him offer to train with her alone during his morning sessions, and she happily accepted before leaving. The next moment, Saya dropped down from a tree like a ninja and put him in a chokehold while asking why he was shamelessly flirting with another girl. After letting him go, she asked if he would be her partner for the Phoenix Festa, but Ayato told her that he already chose Julius as his partner. The next day, as Ayato and Kirin went on their first training session, they had no idea that they were being watched by Camilla and Ernesta. As they continued on their way, they were attacked by some monsters, and no matter how many times Ayato cut them up, the monsters kept regenerating. Thankfully, Kirin was smart enough to realize that they needed to destroy their cores. After she destroyed the core of one of the monsters, the others fled, but before they could catch their breath, they returned and started attacking again. Ayato managed to dodge and noticed the ground cracking, so he tried to get away, but the ground opened up, causing him to fall. Fortunately, Kirin caught him, but the area she was leaning on broke off, so the both of them fell. They soon found out that they had fallen into the sewers. As they landed in the water, however, a giant serpent also emerged from the water and attacked them. Ayato managed to slay the monster in a single strike, which shocked Kirin because she had never seen Ayato use his full power. Once again, because he used so much power, the chains binding Ayato tightened around him and he passed out. When he woke up, he explained to Kirin that he could only fight for 5 minutes before losing consciousness. Ayato then asked her what she was fighting for, so she told him that it was to save her father, who was detained for ending a man who held her hostage. She said because he was a Genstella, the charges weren't dropped and he was sent to prison. Kirin told him that her uncle was the only person willing to help her, which was why she did everything he asked of her. Ayato tried to comfort her and told her everything would work out as she started making decisions for herself. After they were rescued, Kieran met up with her uncle, and he warned her to stay away from Ayato, but she disagreed. She then made up her mind to start making decisions herself and bid her uncle farewell, even though he cursed at her. Later on, Ayato agreed to duel against Kieran, and they both went all out. But in the end, Ayato was declared the winner. In the locker room after the duel, Julius and Saya had just congratulated Ayato, when Claudia came in with Kieran, who wanted to ask Ayato again if she could train with him and his team. After they agreed, his uncle came to disturb their peace, so they let him in to hear what rubbish he had to say. He told Kieran to stop disgracing him and tried to order her around, but she stood her ground, so he threatened her. Claudia then intervened and told him to back off, else she would get her mother involved, so he did as she asked. Meanwhile, at Alicant, Camilla and Ernesta reviewed all the data they got from watching Ayato and Kieran's fight with the serpent. Back at Seducan, Saya approached Kieran and asked her to be her partner for the Phoenix Festa. A few days later at the cafeteria, a female student asked Ayato for his autograph, which he gave to her, and before she left, she wished him good luck at the Phoenix Festa. Julius teased him for being a mini-celebrity, now that he'd knocked Kieran out of her position as number 1. Ayato admitted he'd never expected to become popular because of it, but Yabuki advised him to enjoy it while it lasted. While they were talking, Julius pulled up a picture of his autograph online and showed it to him. Ayato was surprised, but Yabuki said it was something students did to make extra cash. Saya then told him not to worry, as his true fans were always rooting for him. Kieran added that she was one of those fans, causing Julius to ask what they would do once they were up against them in the festa. Saya said they would do their best, but Julius pointed out that it wouldn't be easy as their team was just formed. Saya argued that Julius and Ayato were in the same boat, but Ayato advised them to work on their teamwork. Saya then got up and announced that they wouldn't be joining Ayato and Julius for training the next day because they were going to bond as a team. However, when Saya and Kieran met up the next day, they had no idea what to do, as none of them had ever had friends. Kieran asked Saya what she wanted to do, so she suggested they go shopping because she wanted to buy her father a birthday gift. At the mall, Kieran made different suggestions for an ideal birthday present, but Saya rejected all of them. Eventually, they sat down on a bench and Kieran asked Saya about her father, so she described him as a mad scientist. Just as Saya was telling her about how her father gave her a new gun every year on her birthday, she suddenly had an idea. She then pulled up a map and asked Kieran for help in locating the place, since she had a bad sense of direction. The shop was located in the bad part of the city, and Kieran made sure to express her concern for their safety, even though Saya assured her it was okay. When they got to the shop, Saya looked around and picked out a gun. She asked the owner if the original generator was still in it, and after he said yes, she paid for it, and they left. Kieran asked why she had picked that one. She told her that even if it was trash, it had a generator that was similar to her father's work. Saya then asked Kieran what she wanted to do, and she asked Saya to teach her how to swim. At the pool, Saya asked why Kieran hadn't gone to Ayato to learn how to swim, causing the poor girl to panic and almost drown. Kieran admitted that it was because she wanted him to be proud by the time he discovered she could swim. Saya then told her to keep practicing while she went to get some drinks, but as Kieran practiced, she accidentally crashed into a girl floating in the pool. Kieran managed to swim to the surface before she could drown and apologized to the girl. The girl refused to listen and even challenged Kieran to a duel, but when she recognized Kieran as the top-ranked student of Seducan Academy, she chickened out. However, that didn't stop her from mocking Kieran when she learned that she couldn't swim, so Saya, who was standing at the edge of the pool, threw a flotation device at the girl. Annoyed, the girl demanded to know who Saya was, and she told her she was Kieran's partner. When she asked what Saya's rank was, she admitted she was unranked, so the girl challenged her to a duel. She also introduced herself as Violet Weinberg, the 35th ranked student of Queensvale Girls Academy. She hoped that by bragging about her rank, Saya would get scared, but Saya surprised her by accepting the duel. When the duel began, she tried to show off her skill. However, Saya pulled out a Lux ray gun and fired before she could react. The shot sent her skipping like a rock across the pool, knocking her out immediately, so the duel ended with Saya as the winner. Later on, Saya and Kieran sat by the edge of the pool and Saya advised Kieran to learn how to stand up for herself. Kieran admitted that she had been under her uncle's thumb for so long that she wasn't sure how to defend herself from others. Saya told her not to underestimate herself, and Kieran thanked her for the advice before asking why she chose her as her partner. Saya told her that she had picked her to be her partner because she used the same swordsmanship as Ayato. During their next training session, Ayato and Julia watched Kieran and Saya. As they watched them, they admitted that they had improved and decided it was time to up their game if they wanted to win. A few days before the Phoenix Festa, the student council president of Wolf Academy and his assistant Corona visited the disciplinary rooms under the school. There, they opened the cell holding Irene, and Dirk ordered her to participate in the Phoenix Festa. He told her she was to get rid of Ayato at all costs, and said it didn't matter if she won or lost the Festa. Irene asked why he wanted Ayato gone, so he explained that his Orgalux Servaresto would pose a problem for them in the future. Before agreeing to do as he ordered, Irene asked if her sister was safe, and he assured her that she was. The day of the Phoenix Festa eventually arrived, so Ayato and the girls along with other contestants and the eager audience gathered at the arena. During the opening ceremony, the chairman of the Festa committee announced that the contestants were allowed to make use of autonomous weapons. Later on, Ayato and Julia decided to eat lunch while they waited for their turn. However, they couldn't find Kieran and Saya anywhere. But Ayato spotted Lester and tried to invite him instead. Lester turned him down, saying they weren't friends, and told him to make sure that he didn't lose until they were matched against each other. Soon after, Saya and Kieran joined them with the lunches they had prepared, so they all went to the waiting room to eat. When it was finally their turn, Ayato and Julius took the stage, and the announcers talked about their ranks. Ayato was a bit nervous, as it was his first time on a big stage, but Julius was unbothered. As soon as the signal went off for the match to begin, their opponents charged at them. Julius and Ayato didn't seem fazed, as Julius had already suspected they would do that, so she walked off, asking Ayato to take care of them. Ayato made a show of his abilities before he charged at their opponents and swiftly destroyed their badges. The crowd went wild as soon as Ayato and Julius were announced as the winners. On their way back to the waiting room, Julius told Ayato that their strategy had worked and said they had to keep it up until the end. Inside the waiting room, they met Yabuki, who told them that he had come to watch the Alicant match, which was coming up next. The match happened to be between Alicant and Wolf, but the Alicant contestants had been substituted by Ernestas puppets. The Wolf team didn't seem happy with the fact that they were being used as test subjects, so the male puppets agreed to give them a 60-second head start. When the match began, the Wolf team pulled out all the stops, trying to bring down the Alicant puppets. But it was useless, as they couldn't even get past the puppets' defenses, and by the time the 60 seconds were up, the puppets easily took them down. While the audience cheered for the winners of the round, Ayato couldn't help but worry about the puppets. Saya has just pointed out that the protective barrier that the puppets had would pose a big problem for them when her father called. As soon as she answered the call, her father's voice boomed from the speaker as he gushed about how powerful the defense the puppets used was. When he was done geeking out, he informed Saya that he had sent her a new gun and asked her to pick it up at customs. After the call ended, Saya left with Kieran to go pick up the package, while Yabuki said he would try to sneak into the interview for the Alicant students. Julius then suggested to Ayato that they train some more instead of sitting around doing nothing. Later on, Julius and Ayato tried to hurry back to the arena in time for the next match, but Ayato told Julius to slow down. Julius listened to him and slowed down, but their attention was drawn to a large crowd that had gathered to watch a street brawl. When they got closer, they noticed Irene beating up some thugs, and when she noticed Ayato, she remembered him from the file Dirk had shown her. Immediately, she approached them, but Julius stepped between her and Ayato. Irene demanded she move because she had no business with her, but Julius refused and pointed out that her street brawl could get her in trouble. Irene insisted that she had only been defending herself, but Jules said her actions could lead to her suspension from the Festa. Irene was intrigued by Julius, so she challenged her to a duel and pulled out her Lux weapon. Ayato and Julius quickly moved out of the way to avoid getting cut down by the unhinged psycho in front of them. Irene smiled at them with an evil glint in her eyes as she commended them for being smart enough to pull back. Just then, her sister Presola called to her and made her way to where Irene was as she scolded her for picking fights. Presola apologized on behalf of her sister and even forced Irene to apologize before she dragged her away. When they were gone, Julius pulled up Presola's file and said the only information they had on her was that she was Irene's partner in the Festa. Ayato then asked Julius if she had a death wish because she had provoked Irene, and Julius said she'd done it to confirm her suspicion that Irene had a reason to approach him. Ayato pointed out that he had never met her before, but Julius said it had to be that Wolf was planning something sinister. While they were speaking, they received information that Saya and Kieran's match had begun. At the arena, each girl took on an opponent, and although Kieran's opponent was very skilled in martial arts, she managed to cut his badge with her sword. Saya, on the other hand, used her gun as a shield to block her opponent's attacks, and when she had an opportunity, she shot him down, knocking him out and giving them victory. After their match, they went to take a shower in the locker room, and when they were done, Saya walked out without a towel. Kieran went after her and tried to hand one to her, but instead of taking it, Saya tried to grope her melons. Kieran blocked all her attempts until she stopped trying and turned her attention to Ayato and Julius at the door. Kieran tried to ask them to wait until they got dressed, but Saya opened the door and stood before them shamelessly in all her naked, flat-chested glory. Kieran, on the other hand, was so embarrassed when her towel dropped and flashed out of her wobbly girls that she screamed. 5 days later, the second round of the competition began, and during Ayato and Julius' match, Julius was the only one who fought. She easily defended against her opponents before attacking them with fireballs, which the first girl tried to avoid but accidentally tripped, allowing Julius to hit her with her fireballs. The second opponent did not last long either, as Julius hit her with a huge fireball, securing a second win for her team. The next match was Lester and Randy against Irene and Presola, and their main strategy was to prolong the match because Irene's Lux drained the energy of its wielder. However, Irene wasn't dumb enough to fall for their tricks and saw through their plan, so she attacked Randy first. By hitting her scythe on the ground, she used its power to pull Randy to the floor using gravity. Lester tried to come to his aid but blocked his attacks and kicked him to the ground before going after Randy again. When she got close enough to him, she increased the gravitational pull on him, which knocked him out. Lester then used an all-out attack on her, and it was strong enough to knock her down. Irene got back up and told him she was done playing games with him, so said she was going to show him what she was made of. She walked behind Presola and, to everyone's surprise, began to drink her blood like a vampire. It turned out that to use the power of her Lux, she had to feed it blood, and the only way to get it was to drink from Presola. During the whole exchange, Presola remained unharmed. Her powers seemed to also work on Irene because they healed her injuries and increased her strength. Almost immediately, Irene attacked Lester with gravity balls and pinned him down until he conceded defeat. Later on, in the Saidokan viewing booth, Claudia congratulated Ayato for making it to the final round and admitted she was happy to finally be alone with him. She even placed her head on his shoulder as she spoke, but before Ayato could reject her advances, he received a call from Kieran. She informed him that she had lost sight of Saya and said that when called her to know where she was, Saya had told her she had no idea. Ayato asked Kieran not to worry as he was already aware that her inbuilt GPS was faulty and promised to look for her. He apologized to Claudia, who complained after their time was cut short before he went in search of Saya. During his search, he bumped into Presola, who was being chased by some thugs, so he helped her. While they hid in the roof of a building, Presola thanked him for saving her and explained that her sister had caused some trouble at a nearby casino, so the guys there had come after her. The moment she mentioned that she had called Irene to come help her, Ayato realized he was in some deep shit. Almost immediately, Irene appeared out of nowhere with her weapon in hand and started cussing at Ayato. Presola informed her that Ayato had been the one to save her, but Irene refused to believe her. She argued that Presola was trying to cover up for Ayato, but Presola insisted on his innocence, so she calmed down. However, she still didn't trust that he helped Presola out of the goodness of his heart and asked why he had been in the alleyway. Before Ayato could respond, Saya and Kieran called to let him know that they were together and he could stop looking for Saya. After the call, he explained his side of the story, so Irene thanked him for helping her sister. But she told him she didn't like the fact that she was indebted to him and said she had to repay him before their match. She then showed him the next match pairing, which was between both their teams. Later on, she burst through the walls of Dirk's office, demanding to know what his stupid constipated ass was doing when her sister was being chased. Dirk told her to stop whining and said that it didn't matter if Presola got a few injuries since she could heal herself. His words angered Irene, so she tried to strike him but was stopped by an invincible force. She immediately jumped back, knowing fully well that it had been a cat who protected Dirk from her attack. He then told her that the reason the cats guarding Presola hadn't done anything was because Ayato had interfered. He reminded her that the cats were not supposed to be seen by anyone as they operated in the shadows like ninjas. Irene accepted his explanation and said that she was going to settle the debt she owed Ayato before leaving. As soon as she left, Dirk ordered Corona to do a reading for the match, and after she was done, she informed him that the sisters would be victorious. Hearing this filled Dirk with hope, so he asked her to summon his vice president before making a call to the seventh golden eye. Meanwhile, Ayato and Julius were in the training room when he informed her that Irene had invited him to dinner to thank him for saving her sister. Julius couldn't believe he had been stupid enough to accept an invitation from his enemies. Ayato assured her that there was no sinister plan behind it, so she insisted on going with him. At Presola and Irene's place, Presola welcomed them at the door, and while she went to finish preparing dinner, Irene and Julius got into a little dissing match. The only reason they stopped was because Presola brought the food out, so they all sat to eat. As they ate, Irene let it slip that she gambled because she needed a lot of money. So Julius asked why she couldn't just get the money from the festa. At that moment, Presola excused herself, so Irene explained that she had borrowed money from Dirk years ago. She said that as part of her agreement, she wasn't allowed to participate in the festa or pay him back from the prize money. This made Julius point out that she had another reason for entering the festa, and Irene admitted she had entered it on Dirk's orders. When Julius asked what business Dirk had with Ayato that made him a target, Irene told them he considered Ayato's Lux weapon a threat, so he wanted to get rid of him. After dinner, Presola walked Ayato and Julius out, and while they were outside she told them she was glad she could be of help to her sister because she was fighting for her. However, she admitted that her sister became a different person whenever she wielded her Lux, and it scared her. Later that night, Ayato went to see Claudia because he was concerned about Irene's Orga Lux, but he found her fast asleep. When he tried to wake her up, she attacked him, so he dodged her attacks and managed to avoid getting stabbed until she woke up. Claudia immediately apologized to him, but he told her he was at fault for coming in unannounced. He then asked why she had lost control in her sleep, so she told him she would explain everything on the condition that he joined her team for the Griffin Festa, which he agreed to. After that, she revealed that the price for using her Orga Lux was experiencing her own death over and over again. She said that she had died at least 1,200 times since she began using the weapon, which made Ayato worried about her. After Claudia assured him that she was fine, he asked about Irene's Orga Lux, and she told him it had the power to alter the mind of its user. Elsewhere, a crazed-looking Irene stood staring at the moon, while the bodies of the thugs who chased Presola earlier in the day lay behind her. The next day before the match, Ayato proposed a new strategy to Julius, and she agreed to go along with it as long as they won the match. When the match began, Ayato made a show of unbinding himself and revealing his powers. Julius then attacked Irene with fire discs to distract her from Ayato. But Irene deflected the fire discs and still managed to block Ayato's attack. After fighting against Ayato for a while, she jumped back but noticed Julius had sent some fireballs her way, so she used her gravity balls against them. She commended the both of them for working together like a well-oiled machine, even though their team had just been formed. Irene tried to trap Ayato using a gravity field, but Julius alerted him to it, so he managed to avoid it just as Julius tried attacking Presola. Irene got to her sister in time and protected her with a barrier before she drank from her again. As she approached Ayato again, Presola fell to her knees, causing Ayato to ask Irene if she wanted to continue using her sister as her personal blood bank. Irene told him to mind his business and attacked him, but he defended himself and blocked the attack before Julius joined in the fight. Ayato tried his best to break her weapon, and that was when she realized what they were planning. In retaliation, she used her gravity balls against them, but Ayato slashed them all before he pushed her into a trap set by Julius. Julius activated the trap by blowing Irene up, but when the smoke cleared up, they discovered Irene had protected herself using gravity balls. They also realized that her Orga Lux had taken control of her mind as they watched her approach her sister and almost drained all the blood from her. But Ayato managed to get closer. He tried to convince her to take control of her body again by talking to her, and it worked for a while. However, her Orga Lux was too powerful and stole control of her body back from her. Ayato managed to knock the weapon out of her hand and channeled all his energy into his Servaresto, which he used to destroy Irene's Orga Lux. Irene fell to the ground unconscious. Ayato and Julius were declared winners. Exhausted, Ayato fell to the floor, so Julius ran to his side, but it was already too late because the chains binding him began to tighten around him. This allowed those who were watching the match to discover that Ayato could only use his ability for a certain period. Sometime later, Presola woke up in a hospital because her sister had nearly sucked the life out of her while under the influence of her Orga Lux. Irene was glad her sister was awake and apologized to her for allowing herself to be consumed by her weapon. Presola assured her that she didn't hold any grudges and said that she wanted to become stronger so she could fight alongside her instead of just acting as a human power bank designed to replenish her energy. Back in the arena waiting room, Ayato woke up and assured Julius that he would be fine in time for their next match. Julius was still worried about him, so she asked him to rely on her as much as possible since they were a team. The next moment, his unofficial harem made up of Claudia, Saya, and Kieran walked in and started fussing over him. Saya pulled his face into her non-existent plots. Kieran snatched his face and pushed her melons against his face, so Julius came to his rescue and pulled him away. But Claudia snatched him away and said she didn't have a match so she could take care of him. Ayato managed to pull away because he needed to breathe and tried to convince the girls that he was fine. Meanwhile, Yabuki stood outside the room, laughing at what was happening as he wondered what would happen next. What do you think would happen next? If you want to find out if Ayato would find his sister, let us know by commenting more. If you like anime recaps like this, watch this video.